You want to build a $5 billion data center? Want more six-figure careers with health care retirement and no college debt? You don't call Elon Musk. You call us. North America's building trade unions. And yeah, that means all of us, including our brother, Smart Apprentice, Kilmar Arbrega Garcia, who we demand to be returned to us and his family now. Bring him home.
That was North America's Building Trades Union President Sean McGarvey calling for union member Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be brought back home to his family and his job. The men who were grabbed, chained, shaved, and sent to a prison in El Salvador, would you call this, what you're seeing right there on the screen, would you call this deportation in America? What happened to these people? How would you describe it? What's the term you would use?
I would say they were illegally abducted by U.S. government agents and then taken to foreign prisons against the law. And the reason why it's important to treat each of these cases individually under the law is because our Constitution requires due process before people can be deprived of their liberty.
This week on Morning Mika, tough deportation, forced removals, or outright kidnapping. I'm Mika Brzezinski here with Simone Sanders Townsend, Huma Abedin, and Jen Psaki. And our special guest today is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Abrego Garcia's story has become a flashpoint in the debate over Trump's immigration policy and his campaign promise of mass deportations. Abrego Garcia's family says the 29-year-old husband and father of three in Maryland fled gang violence in El Salvador as a teenager and built a life in the United States. Last month, despite a court order protecting him from deportation, Abrego Garcia was taken by ICE agents accused of gang affiliation based on unverified claims and was removed and sent with this group to El Salvador, where he was initially locked up in one of the country's most notorious prisons. A prison where inmates reportedly never see the light of day, where there have been documented systematic physical beatings, torture, and intentional denial of access to food, water, clothing, and health care. The Supreme Court has since ruled that Abrego Garcia's deportation or forced removal was unlawful and ordered the government to bring him back. But the Trump administration has resisted, and lawmakers from both parties have been critical of Trump's actions, calling this a massive failure of justice. This case is about more than just one man and what he may or may not have done. It is about due process, accountability, and the very real consequences of getting it wrong. Everyone deserves equal protection under the law. Everyone deserves due process. And it's not just one man being denied those fundamental rights. Take Andre Jose Hernandez Romero, a gay Venezuelan makeup artist seeking asylum in the U.S. who was wrongly identified as a gang member and deported to that same mega prison in El Salvador. Or Eduardo Nunez Gonzalez, a Miami man detained by ICE while taking out the garbage. Or 29-year-old Juan Francisco Mendez. ICE agents were seen smashing his car window in Massachusetts and detaining him, a Guatemalan man seeking asylum in the U.S. Trump TV will tell you that Democrats don't want criminals and gang members to be thrown out of the country. No, everyone wants criminals and gang members to be put into jail where they can't hurt people again. And yet, here in America, even criminals deserve the presumption of innocence and due process under the law, whether they are illegal immigrants or American citizens. None of these men accused of being gang members got the chance to prove otherwise. And in many cases, they are being defamed by the president himself, or his attorney general, and many more. Even influential podcast host and prominent supporter of Donald Trump, Joe Rogan, is criticizing this and the president. Take a listen.
You got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, like, lassoed up and deported and sent to, like, El Salvador prisons. This is kind of crazy that could be possible. That's horrific, and that's bad for the cause. Like, the cause is, let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees. But let's not innocent gay hairdressers get lumped up with the gangs, and then, like, how long before that guy can get out? Can we figure out how to get him out? Is there any plan in place to alert the authorities that they've made a horrible mistake and correct it? Like, we have to make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters.
Lisa Rubin, I mean, there's no one better. You always make me want to go to law school every time I talk to you, and I know that's probably true for all of us. I think this has been such an education for so many of us about what the law allows for and doesn't, and a law does not allow for a lot of what the administration is doing. But help us understand. We saw Senator Van Hollen talk about this, but what is the legal definition of deportation versus what is actually happening to these men? Because I think we've all been trying to change our language and vernacular on this a bit, but what's the legal definition?
Jen, the legal definition of deportation is the formal process of taking someone from this country and removing them to a different country, including and usually their country of origin, but subject to the immigration laws and the Constitution of the United States. And so I'm really glad that you guys are focused on the language here, because as Senator Van Hollen shared with you, what is happening here doesn't fit within that construct of deportation. It looks more like an abduction, or what I would call a forced removal without due process. And of course, the word deportation doesn't include within it holding somebody in law enforcement custody. It just means taking them from point A to point B. And many of the people who are lawfully deported from this country, in fact, that is what happens to them. They no longer have the right to be in the United States, but they are repatriated to their own country of origin, where they are released and then can fold back into the general population. So when we talk about deportation, usually we're not talking about anything that results in the custody of people in another country, much less their forced imprisonment in a notorious facility like CICOT in El Salvador.
You know, Lisa, I think putting the definition on the table and making sure we get it right is so important. I'm wondering what your take is on just what people can do to protect themselves, or if they are approached by an ICE agent or someone who is identifying themselves as an agent of the government, because it does feel like a very scary time to be here if you are an undocumented person, if you are an asylum seeker, if you are someone that is a permanent legal resident, if you do have a visa that is here, or even if you're an American citizen who happens to look like you are an undocumented person, i.e. Latino. Because we have examples of American citizens being detained as well. So what rights do people have? Because Eduardo Nunez Gonzalez, he was taking out his trash.
Well, let's stop, Simone, and maybe divide the world for a second. I want to take a step back and divide the world into a before and after, because immigration advocates will tell you that there are lots of things, in fact, that you can do well before you have an encounter with ICE or local police that leads to an immigration detention. So the first thing that I would tell people is think about, if you have children, who a backup caregiver in your life is, who has an undisputed right to stay in this country. And then make arrangements not only with that person, but with any school that your child attends, any daycare that they attend, that they know to contact that backup caregiver if you cannot be reached. And of course, it's important that that backup caregiver is himself or herself somebody who has the right to be here. The other thing that you can do to prevent a confrontation is carrying your papers with you at all times. So if you are a lawful permanent resident of this country, for example, make sure your green card is with you at all times. If you're here pursuant to a student visa, similarly, bring those papers with you, have them on your person so that you're never in a dispute over whether you are who you say you are. For example, when you showed that footage of the guy whose window was smashed in, that started with a case of mistaken identity. They were looking for a particular person. They kept insisting that he was that man, and he was not, in fact, that man, but nonetheless got caught up in ICE detention because he is a person without legal status in this country. So those are two important things people can do from the outset. Now, you asked, what can you do if you have a law enforcement interaction? When you show that gentleman who was taking out his trash, there is a difference, at least in terms of how the immigration law sees it, between public spaces and private spaces. And taking out your trash and being out on your sidewalk, that sidewalk belongs technically to a municipality. That's a place where law enforcement is allowed to be without a warrant. But if ICE comes knocking on your door, for example, you don't have to answer it. What immigration advocates like the ACLU or organizations like Brooklyn Defenders, which is an organization that has a series of instructional videos on its website that I encourage people to check out at wehaverights.us. If they come to your door, you always want to prioritize your own safety. And I want to make sure that people understand this. If you feel that you are physically in danger, we are not advocating that you sacrifice your safety. At all times, your physical safety is the most important thing. But if you feel safe and secure to do so, you don't have to answer your door. You should insist on seeing a warrant if they say they have one. You should insist that it have a signature on it. If it's blank, it's not going to be a valid warrant. You should ask for identification of the person who's at their door, know what agency they're with. For example, are they with your local police department or are they with ICE, for example? Ask the name of the person. And most importantly, if you are a bystander, do what countless numbers of other people have done that have led to the footage that you have shown in the lead up to this episode, which is document, document, document. You have a legal right under the First Amendment to document immigration interactions so long as you are not interfering with law enforcement. And what immigration advocates will tell you to do is keep your camera focused on law enforcement, not the person who is the subject of the action. And if the law enforcement themselves tries to interact with you or to tell you to stop taping or to step back, make sure that you can be heard responding to it. So you can say things like, I am exercising my legal right to document this. If they ask you to step back, you can say, I do not believe that I am interfering with the mission of law enforcement right now. But at all times, if you're an actor in this, insist on your right to document, again, so long as you feel safe. But we know from the footage that we've seen that part of what calls these issues to the attention of the public and allows people to see that this really is a problem is that there are brave people out there that will take their cell phones in the heat of the moment and make sure that what is happening isn't just something that we can describe as we're having this conversation, but we can show.
Wow. Lisa Rubin, thank you so much. So many different angles to this. We appreciate your coming on and explaining all of it. Now, Huma, you've been researching this notorious maximum security prison in El Salvador. What did you find out about the conditions there?
Well, this infamously notorious prison that we've already referred to in the earlier in the program, Seacoat, was built in 2023. It's got 8 pavilions that hold up to 40,000 inmates. From by all reports, it's got metal bunks, no sheets, no pillows, mattresses. It's got open toilets. It's part of a prison system where 108,000 people are crammed into spaces meant for 70,000 inmates. They're cut off from the outside world. There are reports of just dismal, horrific conditions, torture, and death. Our own U.S. State Department described these conditions as life-threatening, and local human rights groups have said that almost 350 people have died since 2022. And, you know, the Human Rights Watch, had a report from March where they themselves were denied access, but doctors who visited inmates there said cases of malnutrition, of fungal infections, of evidence of severe malnutrition was normal in what they saw. And one of the formerly detained inmates, there was an 18-year-old construction worker, that the Human Rights Watch interviewed, and he said that new inmates in the prison system were beaten for the first hour by a baton, one so hard until one of his ribs cracked. This 18-year-old former inmate also said that the cells were so overcrowded that you either had to sleep on the floor or sleep standing. And, you know, to the point that Lisa was saying earlier in the show, I spoke with the attorney of Andre Jose Hernandez Romero yesterday, and she herself said that since her client was taken 5 weeks ago, the word that she used was disappeared or rendered, she's had no access. His family has had no access. They have no information about his condition. And the term that she used, that Bukele himself has called this, you know, the term she used was a curated torture tour. The only people who have access get a very specific show. Frankly, a show that our government pays for, because we've paid our administration. This administration has paid to have prisoners incarcerated there, and that their only recourse is through these habeas petitions. In fact, they had a hearing in San Diego yesterday, which was the third hearing that they had, and it remains to be seen what her client's condition is in, and so many other people are in a very similar situation, unfortunately.
Simone, President Trump has said his administration is actively exploring a proposal to detain U.S. citizens, he calls them homegrowns, and send them to prisons in El Salvador. If he can find the legal loophole to do it, is nothing off limits?
I mean, Mika, it's a very good question. You know, President Trump said he was actually caught on a live stream saying this, that was being live streamed by President Bukele, the Salvadorian president, from his team in the Oval Office. And President Trump looked to President Bukele and noted the homegrowns are next. You're going to need more prisons. And then when asked about that interaction in the Oval Office, sitting next to President Bukele, the president hedged a bit and said, oh, well, if it's legal, but I do think that we should get the criminals out. And you know, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor put out a statement a couple of weeks ago, and she said that the Trump administration's legal arguments around deportation suggest that, quote, the U.S. government already believes it could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. President Trump has directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to see if it is possible, if it is legal to take people who have been convicted of crimes and are imprisoned here in the United States and send them to this El Salvadorian prison. But I just want to be very clear. As someone that, you know, grew up doing juvenile justice reform work, this is not legal. And this is going to be played out in the courts. But what this administration is doing is they are stress testing the system. They are stress testing the system of Congress. They're stress testing our legal system, and they're stress testing the powers of the executive branch. And this is a really, really, really big test that, frankly, a lot of people are going to need to not just pay attention to, but be proactive about if we say this is not who we are as Americans.
So to Simone's point, Jen, who are you looking to in terms of elected officials who would be able to step up to halt what is clearly illegal, wrongful? I call them forced removals. It doesn't really seem like the deportation process is respected here at all. And what needs to happen?
We have seen some, which is encouraging, some elected officials. Senator Van Hollen, obviously you played him earlier. We've seen some members of the House, Democrats in the House, go down to El Salvador and try to keep the spotlight on what is happening to these men and these illegal renderings, whatever you want to call them. It certainly doesn't even, it feels like using the word deportations, I think we've all learned, is not doing justice to how outrageous and illegal this is. So there is some of that happening. That's a good thing. I think the courts are obviously taking steps, not in a political way, but there are steps, and some legal experts have suggested that some members of the administration could be held in contempt for their activity here. Will that change the Trump administration? We don't know yet. I think the challenge here, which is what we're all grappling with, is that it's up to the Trump administration and/or the courts or the Trump administration to abide by the courts in order to bring many of these men back. I will note, Mika, because we've all talked about immigration. It is an interesting, humane issue, but an interesting political issue. Trump's border security steps, his support for stronger actions at the border are supported by more Americans than most Democrats want to always acknowledge. That is a truth and something that is an important takeaway from 2024. At the same time, and there have been a couple of polls, and I just want to cite one, when you ask people specifically, and I'm just using the phrasing in here, whether or not Xiomara Abrego Garcia should be brought back to the United States from El Salvador, 50% of Americans say yes, 28% say no. And I think this is important to note because when you get into the specifics of what Trump is doing, it's not just about making our border more secure. This is illegal actions to kick people out of the country who have the legal right to be here. And he's opened the door, to Simone's point, to even go after American citizens and others. And that is different than the concerns the majority of Americans have about border security and doing more to address the broken immigration system.
Jen Psaki, Simone Sanders Townsend, Huma Abedin, thank you as always. You know, we spoke a lot about men on today's show, but I want to underscore a point. This is not just about these men. This is about all of us. As former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton recently posted, before the election, I warned there is no safe haven under authoritarianism. If they can ship Xiomara Abrego Garcia to a foreign prison accused of no crime with no trial, they can do it to anyone. Americans of conscience must stand against this now. I could not agree more. That does it for Morning Mika. We'll see you soon on YouTube and Peacock.